G'day Thrivers, Jess here, and today I had quite the interview for you. If you've ever wanted to be super successful selling at markets and shows, then do not miss this interview because Mona, my guest today, has done an amazing job, and most of her business is based on attending the right markets and getting her work in front of the right people. And she's going to talk a lot about that today and how she has developed her business over the last couple of years. She makes amazing, beautiful timber and resin designs. And I actually know Mona personally. I've met her a few times at markets in Brisbane. She's based in the same sort of part of the country as me. And I was drawn to her work because it is really beautiful and she has some really unique pieces that I'd never seen anywhere else. And so I was really excited when she was willing to come on the show. Now she travels all over Australia, going to markets, selling her work, and that has been the most successful marketing strategy for her. So we're going to dive deep into how to choose the right markets, the ins and outs of doing the investigation, why markets might be the best avenue for you like they are for Mona and how to decide that, the challenges of relying on markets rather than a steady stream of online income, and much more in today's interview. So let's get to it. I'm really excited to bring this one to you today. G'day everyone, I'm here today with Mona from River Timber Designs. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I'm very excited to have Mona here because I actually know her. I've met her a few times at markets over the years, and her work is absolutely beautiful. So I'm excited to have her here and share her work and her story with you all. So Mona, can you tell us a little bit about what you make and how you came to make it?
Okay, so I make homewares and jewelry made out of Australian timbers, but specifically the burl that grows on the tree. And I use the live edges, so I try to utilize as much of the timber as possible, and combine that with resin to kind of create colorful reflections of nature that surrounds us. That's probably the best way of explaining what I make without actually seeing it. And how I started, I always say, like, there's never a simple answer when it comes down to how I start anything, I guess. There's multiple layers, but the quick, easy way of explaining is that I was working in corporate, had an injury. I got RSI in both my arms and had to go on sick leave. And at the time, I was like constantly going, I want to start my own business again because I had run previous businesses and I wasn't really passionate, fully in what I was doing. And in a blessing in disguise, by having to stop and not being able to just continue on that little, whatever squirrel wheel, it allowed me to kind of explore my creativity again. And at the time when I was kind of, not being able to work fully, we had a tree in our backyard that had fallen down, and my partner and I were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we got that milled, made some furniture, live sustainably. And the process of cutting that tree into slabs, like usable wood, really just ignited like my creative passion. And it kind of felt like someone who goes like gold mining for the first time, or gem hunting. Is like, that's what it felt like, seeing this ugly log that's been laying on the ground for 10 years just reveal its beauty from inside. That's the short version.
Okay. So you're inspired to create with that piece of wood. What did you think you were going to make with it to start with? Like you said, furniture.
Yeah, so so this goes back now to what, 2018, 2019, something like that. Yeah, 2018. And the plan was to make a dining room table. That still hasn't happened. I feel like whenever you talk to anyone who works in trades, they're like, their house is the last piece that gets done. And that's kind of rings true with what I do as well. All my focus is on the business instead of on my own projects.
And you started, okay, furniture, no, but then you started with small pieces. What was the first thing you made?
So long story short, I actually had a friend come over helping us move these slabs, and he's a person who mentioned resin. I had never heard of it, not really even seen about it because it was quite early on in the resin world. So I kind of deep dove into the American Canadian market, and I was like, "Oh, this looks really cool. I want to start making tables." I don't know anyone in Australia that makes them. And then I realized that it's actually really expensive, and a lot of people do mistakes, and I like to learn from other people's mistakes instead of doing them myself. So I was like, let's start small. So I literally started with a pendant. I'm not sure if you can see them in the background. I've got a few of my little sample ones in the beginning that I didn't want to sell, and kind of learned what worked and what didn't work kind of in a small scale. And also, obviously, with my injury, it was the smarter thing to do is I was only able to do 5-10 minutes a day, and doing jewelry kind of allowed quite a quick process from start to finish.
Yeah, and you weren't lugging around massive pieces of wood either, which is probably a good idea.
Exactly.
So you can see Mona's wearing some of her earrings and her necklace there. Beautiful. And I think you've got some of your lamps behind you. Is that right?
Which way should I go? That
way? Yes. So those are so cool. I remember seeing them at a market a few years ago, and I think you'd only just started making them. Have they been popular?
They certainly are. I'm the only one in Australia that I know of that has been making them, and I've been making them since about 2-3 years now, I think, maybe 2 years, something like that. And because it's such a eye grabber, like these are the ones behind me are currently not sanded, they're not in their mold, like in their lamp stage. So they look even more amazing when they're finished.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, like when I do big shows, big markets, it's what makes people stop and talk to you and admire everything else. And I think it's really important to have one of those things that make people actually stop in their tracks and go, "Whoa, what's that? And this is amazing!" And it helps boost your confidence as well.
Yeah.
Making.
So a showstopper piece that kind of brings people in, and then they might end up buying some coasters or some jewelry, and some of them will buy the lamps, obviously, but they're a high ticket item, obviously, than the other things. Now, I know you do a lot of markets. Like, what's your main selling channels? How do you get your work out into the world?
So nowadays, it started very differently in the beginning because I resigned from my job 2 weeks before lockdown, and decided that now I'm going to venture into this full time. And obviously, that was a very different kind of process to where it's led me to today. And what I've worked out works really well for me is to do the big, like, design shows, design markets. And I travel all over Australia attending them, and they're normally like the 2 to 3 day ones. And that would probably be 85% of my income. And the rest would be website, little bit of social media from my current followers.
So the markets work really well for you. And we have a good range. I mean, we don't have heaps, but we have a good range of those design markets around the country. How do you fly? How do you get your work there? Because you have some quite big pieces, like your clocks. Some of your clocks are like big.
Yeah, and the lamps are quite heavy as well. Like the larger lamps can be up to 5 kilos. And the same thing with the clocks. There's only one market that I fly to, which is in Melbourne.
Right.
All the other ones are Canberra, Sydney. I haven't done Adelaide for a few years, and I drove to that one part of a little Australia tour.
A long way.
Away for 4 weeks. I was just like, COVID lockdowns have lifted, I'm going. But no, I try to drive to all of them. Melbourne is just like that little bit too far. So I'll drive to Melbourne if I've got a back-to-back with Canberra or Sydney, because then it's worth the extra cost and time away. But when I fly down to Melbourne, I actually intentionally leave out my heavier products.
Right.
so like clocks and, you know, lacy Susans, boards, things like that.
Mm.
And luckily, I've got my sister-in-law who lives there, so she actually is generous enough to store my frame, because I've got like a frame to make it look like a little shop almost when
Cool.
people come visit me. So that's a really good thing, and I've kind of worked out how to fly with heavy things. And
Wow, that's amazing. But I guess it's worth it if it's so much, it's such a big part of your income, that it's worth it to get to those big events. And you obviously get a particular caliber of customer at those sorts of design markets who are willing to spend money on quality goods.
yeah, and I think because I've been very intentional with my products, like I've been listening to your podcast for years, and then the podcast you did with the other two girls.
Yeah. The business of making, yeah.
And that was really helpful at the beginning of my career as well. It still is.
Mm.
But one of the things is that, like, don't make one of a kind products if they're going to not be really like at a good price point. And still, I make one of a kind $29 products and $70 products, and that's why my website sales are a little bit lower, because it's not the focus, because it's so time consuming.
Yeah.
But when I do shows, like, I'm very intentional that my price is, I'm pricing myself at, it's my time, it's the cost of the product, of the materials. And where I find my customers is at these trade shows, at these markets, where people understand it's handmade. There's a certain, like, everyone is quite well priced in regards to not hobby pricing.
Yes.
So when people go there, they're kind of, you're not getting priced out of the market, because everyone else selling underpriced products.
Yeah.
So when they come to your stall, they just go, oh yeah, well, this is the price. Of course it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what you said there about the one of a kind is a really good point, because if you're predominantly selling at markets, it doesn't matter. Like, one of a kind is absolutely fine. Where that becomes difficult is when you're trying to sell online, because then you have to do all that online listing and blah, 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 you know. So for your sorts
500 product photos.
Yeah, exactly. And then edit them and everything. Yeah. So for your sort of work, which is, you know, pretty much can't be anything but one of a kind, really, because you're using, you know, you can kind of go, this is a range of stuff and they'll all look a bit different, but, you know, you really have to say this is the piece because everyone looks identical. Then I think that's a smart choice, you know, to kind of focus your sales in that market sphere rather than focusing on online sales. And do you know of many other folks at markets who are more market focused than online focused?
Good question. Look, I think a lot of people who are starting off definitely are, like, within the first kind of 2-3 years of their making career. They're normally doing the markets first and then website. I think it's also because doing good product photos, having good listing descriptions, like, that's hard to do. And a lot of makers don't want to focus on doing that, because they just want to make. So that's where you see most people earlier in their career focus less on their website. But I'm trying to think of people who are established. I'm not sure. I haven't really had those in-depth conversations about people's websites.
Yeah, you're usually a bit busy when you're at a market.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Do you run your stalls by yourself, or do you have help?
I try and drag my partner Murray with me, mainly not because I specifically any longer need the help. It was so crucial early on, because all those butterflies and just being able to, like, figure out processes in regards to how to service everyone and not feeling overwhelmed. That was so important early on, and he's so supportive. So I'm so glad he came along. Now I don't actually need anyone there with me. Like, I've handled 30,000 crowds on my own, and I can confidently say I can do that. But where I get, like, lonely and bored is on the drives.
Right.
You know, you end up spending 3 days in each direction on the road, and then I always like to try and incorporate that with some downtime. So I love nature. I love hiking. So every time I go traveling, I make sure that I allow at least 1 to 3 hours every day of hiking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a person who likes my alone time, so I always want to drag someone along. So that's mainly why I want someone to come with me, is to have that company in the car and on my little hikes.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is interesting. Would you call yourself an extrovert? And do you think that's why markets appeal to you, because you get to be in that environment with all those people and do face to face with your customers?
100%.
Okay.
I'm like the extrovert of extroverts. I get energy from being around people. Fair enough. Like, doing markets is draining. Like, at the end of the markets, I'm just like, oh, okay, I need 2 days to just lay down on the couch and not do anything. But from a kind of interactive point of view, like, if I didn't do markets, I don't think I could do my business. It gives me so much confidence to keep doing what I'm doing. Gives me so much joy. Yeah, I just love hearing from everyone, like, or just even like just like, oh, what? Like, those kind of reactions that you get from people just walking past, even if they don't stop or buy anything. Yeah, like, makes me go back into the workshop on my own for like another month until the next one. Yeah, no, definitely an extrovert. Definitely love doing markets.
I think understanding yourself is a really important part of being a successful business owner. Like understanding what sort of structure of business will suit you and help you maintain it long term. Because like someone like yourself who's an extrovert, if you had my business where I don't sell at markets and haven't for like a decade, so I'm literally, I mean, my husband works with me, so he's at home every day. But apart from him and the cats, I can go like a week without speaking to another human being, so and that suits me, but other people would struggle with that. And I think, when you are starting out that sort of solo business, it's important to understand what you need to do to make it sustainable and fun and enjoyable for you in the long run.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when they start off, they just do whatever. Like, they say yes to everything. They just make everything, sell everywhere, and sometimes people just fall into like the groove of what ended up happening in the beginning, instead of actually doing what works and doing what makes them happy. Like, I have had throughout the last 5 years so many requests of doing wholesale, doing markets, local markets, even trade shows, doing like, the, what are they called, like, the crystal, like alternative
Expos.
yeah, those kind of things.
Yeah.
Like, I constantly get contacted by them asking if I want to attend. And I've had to learn, obviously from trial and error, but also knowing what I enjoy, to say no to these things. And still don't like saying no. But when you reflect on it and go, is this actually going to make me happy after I've done it? And if the answer is no, well, then say no beforehand.
Yeah. And I think that's a really, really good point. A lot of people do struggle to say no. And I talk about this in my membership and my course, Your Year to Thrive course, this idea of having like your why and your core values. And you can kind of, when you know those things about yourself and your business, it makes decision making a lot easier. You can always run things through those sorts of metrics and go, does this align with like my why, my ultimate goal for my business, where, my core values and how I spend my time and what I do. And it makes it a lot easier to go, well, that's just not a good choice for me. It doesn't fit my business. It doesn't fit my goals and what I want to do with it. And I think in the beginning, it's really exciting. Like when you get invited to something, you're like, oh my God, somebody wants me, somebody loves my stuff. And I also think in the very beginning, it's probably good to try those things and see if they do work for you. Like I tried all of the things when I started in the first few years. I tried all sorts of different markets and wholesale and consignment and, all those sorts of things. And then realized what worked for me and what didn't work for me. And, you will develop that over time. And it sounds like you've worked out a nice balance in your business that works for you. I also, before we leave or move on from the markets, Do you have some advice for newbies who are going to markets, who want to sell at markets, even perhaps the big fancy design markets, because they're quite competitive to get into? And, you know, you obviously have gotten into all of them. Have you got some advice that you can give people as to what they need to focus on to get their businesses into those markets and do well in those environments?
Yeah, a funny question, because my partner has actually just started his own woodworking business.
Oh,
Totally different products to mine, because obviously there's no room for that. But no, like he's seen, you know, the success and the freedom and the flexibility that I've had, and he gets access to all my machinery and knowledge that he wants to take from me and not take from me. So we've actually had those conversations because just starting to apply for markets. So I guess the advice that I've been giving him and that I would give other people would be good product photos. Because otherwise the people who are like checking you out, who are running these markets, how do they know what your product looks like if it's you know, half blurry or half dark one, or there's no scale to the photos or whatever it might be? So I would say that would be probably one of the most important things. And then also being able to kind of give that elevator pitch. For those who are not familiar, it's that, you know, if you're in an elevator and you've got 15 seconds to explain to someone what your business is, how would you explain it in that short amount of time? And that's kind of what these market organizers, as far as I understand, want to, is like they want to be able to understand very quickly, what do you make, what makes you different. A lot of them are very honed in on like sustainability. So obviously I make products with resin. That's not a sustainable material, but what I'm explaining in my process is that all my timber is native Australian. All my offcuts are being used for smaller pieces. If there's any mistakes in my work, I will remake them into other products that, you know, will remove those errors. I will reuse all my like bucket, like to give you an idea. Like, for those who are listening and not watching, I've got plastic mugs with resin things in them that I've reused for years. Like nothing gets thrown out until the very last bit where I cannot reuse them anymore. So those are small little things. Like if you think that, oh well, my business is not eco-friendly, there's always ways that you can explain how you're being conscious. Like all my packaging is recycled. Whenever I get a package that I order, I will reuse that packaging in my packaging to the customer. So small little things like that, that, you know, if you think you can't make your application look good, there's still ways that you can think of untraditional ways. And yeah, just like start small, chat to people at local markets to say like, hey, you know, I'm not wanting to copy your product. Like I don't make anything like you do, because that's a little bit of a what's the word for it? Like,
would be off-putting, I guess.
Yeah. So obviously, you know, talk to someone. If you do pottery, talk to someone who makes macrame, for example, and just say like, hey, you know, I want to do markets. Like, do you find this is a good one? Have you come here many times? Is this your first time? Just like casual conversations, and to gain like, okay, these are handmade markets. But I think that's really important. Like, don't go to a market where the organizer accepts non-handmade products, because you will be priced out. Gucci doesn't go to, you know, Kmart to sell their products, because a customer who goes to Kmart does not expect the quality and the pricing of Gucci, for example. And that's why it's so important that if you have a price point like myself that is kind of in the more high-end luxury, I've almost priced myself out of, you know, your Sunday farmers market.
Hey Thriver, I just wanted to cut in here really quickly to let you know, if you're watching this and you're like, wow, markets sound amazing, I really want to get into this, but I don't know how to get started, I have just the workshop for you. It is Markets 101. So it's everything you need to know to get started with your very first market or your first couple of markets, what you need to do to prepare beforehand, what it's going to be like on the day, etc. So that workshop is available inside the Thrivers Circle, along with 50 plus other video workshops made just for you to help you start and grow a thriving handmade business. So if you want to check that out, head on over to thrivercircle.com. You get immediate access to all of those workshops as soon as you join, as well as access to me in our private Facebook group. We have live calls every month, and most excitingly of all, you get access to Youre to Thrive. It's a year-long comprehensive course that I've created that I wish I'd had in my first year of business, and it will help you to start and grow the business of your dreams. So head on over to thrivercircle.com to find out more.
Yeah. I'm curious, have you thought about signing up at Monday and having a permanent stall there?
I hate mornings, early mornings, and I live a good 2 to 2.5 hour drive from Monday.
Yeah.
So for me, I would either have to stay the night, and then again, because my products take such a long time to make. So from the time where I source the timber, cut it, pour, wait for the curing process, sand, oil, that is a week to 2 weeks. And I've actually got a really wide product range. I've got probably like 10, 12 different products, and then all of those have different colors. So for me to stay on top of my inventory, if you want to call it that, I can't do weekly markets. It just was not sustainable. I did not have time to go into the workshop and be productive to then have my range at every market.
Yeah. For those who don't know, sorry, Mundi's like a premier permanent market here on the Sunshine Coast, and it's twice a week, actually, Wednesdays and Saturdays. And once you commit, like you have to be there every single week, twice a week. So it's a pretty big commitment to have a stall there. And I know a lot of people like hire someone to run their stall for them because they need to be making the stuff. But that's a whole nother level of things. So, okay, so we've talked about getting into the market. How about at the actual market itself? What are some tips for people to do well at a market, or some mistakes you see people making that kind of cut into their sales or profit?
Merchandising. I get upset with myself every market for spending 4 hours plus setting up my stall, when literally setting up my frame, putting out the tables, like doing everything that isn't putting products out takes me half an hour. So I literally spend 3.5 hours. I don't know, well, maybe half an hour lugging everything, but 3 hours. I stand there and rearrange and move things and take photos, walk away, look at it again, look at it from different angles. I look at what my neighbors have for sale. And then I rearrange my products accordingly to how it looks in correlation with what they're selling and how they've set up their stall. And another thing that I pay attention to is customer flow. So obviously before you set up, you can't always gauge where your customers are going to come from. But if it's a repeat market, or it's very obvious with your location that the customers are all going to come through the front door and they're going to come from that location, that you have your hero pieces showing. So I actually walk through the markets as a customer so that I can see what my stall looks like from different distances and from different areas. And again, as I said, like I get upset at myself every time for going, why do I take such a long time doing this every single time? Like I do this day in, month in, month out. One of the things is that I always have new products. So it's really hard to go, the vases go here, the lamps go here, the jewelry goes there, because when I have a new product, it's like, where am I going to fit this in today? Or it's got a different height, and that doesn't work in the empty space that I had created. So merchandising, I think, is just like the number one tip that I can give. Heights. People want to look at things at eye level. if you've ever go to like a local farmer's market and they literally just have one table and everything flat down, it looks like a rummage sale.
Yeah.
And customers who pay handmade prices don't want to feel like it's a rummage sale. They want to feel like it's a shop, like it's
A boutique.
an experience to come and look at your things.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that would be probably number one. Number two is don't be on your phone. I acknowledge every single person. I smile. Like I smile at people walking past. I've worked in sales and I've trained salespeople prior to this. And they were like, my new staff were always asking, Mona, how do you get people like come in and just want to, I used to work in travel, book travel with you. And it's like, when people walk past the shop, I literally smile at them. And then they turn around and come into the shop and they're like, but how do you know they want to travel? I was like, I don't. But by smiling to them, it might have just made, oh, actually, I have been thinking about that thing. So I've used that in my like market experience kind of thing, that I smile at people. It makes people stop in their tracks. Like a lot of people walk around like zombies. They just zone out or get overwhelmed. And if you just have that eye contact with someone, they go, oh, hold on. Oh, what do you make?
And unfortunately, a lot of the stall holders also look like zombies, and that doesn't help anybody.
No, but I think luckily for me, being an extrovert, it comes naturally. And also having worked in sales, it helps to kind of know those little tricks that, you know, I hear a lot from people who are inexperienced or introverts, like, I wouldn't want to be, you know, talked to when I'm shopping. I just want to be left alone. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not the customer. Like, you're not the target audience. Those people will make them clear very easily. They're like, oh, I'm just looking, or look away, or, and then you just leave them alone. Like, but majority of people, specifically I find in handmade roams, they want to connect. They want to know your story. Like every customer, well, not every customer, but like most of my customers get to hear my story. I do the elevator pitch almost with every single customer, because then they go like, oh wow, she actually has a story. I understand this product. I understand, like, I want to buy from this person because she cares and is passionate about what she makes.
I think that's a really important point. So another question I have, you've said some really useful information there. Another question I have is about managing customers at your table. So how do you manage like multiple customers popping in and out, and like serving someone when someone, like, what's your sort of strategy there?
I actually just had a conversation with a friend yesterday about that. It is a fine line of not coming across as not being 100% engaged with your customer, and at the same time making everyone feel like they're being seen. So what I do is I try and make sure that everyone who's standing at my table gets a hi. So they know I've seen them. They know that I know that they're waiting. Normally when I've had that conversation with the customer who's buying something and they've come to like hand me the things and I'm wrapping, I know that I've already had a conversation with them, and now it's at the, I'm just finishing up your sale. So I'll then start talking to other customers.
Right.
So while I'm wrapping and I know that this customer doesn't need engagement anymore, I'm just like, hi, if you have any questions, or, oh, you're looking at coasters. Well, did you know that they double up as a puzzle? You know, or, oh, my jewelry is all hypoallergenic. So that they still get the information they need before they walk off, potentially. And it keeps them normally there going, oh, wow. And I like go, oh, I want to show you some more jewelry. Like, I can see you're looking for purple. I actually got a few extra ones. If you don't mind waiting until I finish this up, I'll show you the other ones. So I'm constantly keeping everyone engaged and keeping people there to want to, so that I can have my pitch and I can have the opportunity to actually find the thing that they're after. Specifically because all my pieces are one of a kind, I actually need to sell to show them the options that might not always be on the table and how to use them and things like that.
Have you ever had like a customer you're currently serving and you're kind of, they've gone, oh, I'm buying this, and you're starting to get it ready, and you talk to another customer and highlight something. The first customer goes, oh, actually, I want some of that too. Like, is there any of that sort of FOMO?
Yep, all the time. And a little trick that I like try and share with like my fellow market holders that want to know is I never take payment until I finish wrapping. Because what do people do while you're wrapping? They're waiting. So they're looking.
Yeah.
And the amount of times people will look around, and especially if you do check me out on socials, you'll see my market stall. Like it can be a bit of overwhelm because there's so many things to look at. I have a lot of time people look at the lamps and then they don't even see the clocks behind, or they miss out on the bookmark. So the longer I can have people there engaged and looking around, the more products they'll end up seeing. So, and there's nothing worse because customers, if they paid, they feel it's either an inconvenience to you or it's an inconvenience to them to then go, oh, sorry, I do actually want this as well. Can we process that as a separate payment? And I never want my customers to feel like they're an inconvenience.
That is a great tip. You know, all the secret squirrel things. That's great. And like that stuff makes a big difference. You know, over time, you're going to be getting a lot more upsells and cross sells from those people just through doing those small things like not taking payment till you finish wrapping, talking to other, like highlighting things. Like I love how you know, you said you gave everybody a hi. So obviously, you know, you're talking to a customer, someone comes along, you're like, g'day or hi or whatever. And then you go back to talking to your customer. But then when they look like, you know, they're interested in something and you've got that time, you don't just say hello again. You go, you have something to tell them about every specific product. Like you have something a hook that will capture their attention or get them to stay a little bit longer. And that's because you obviously understand your products and you understand your customers and you understand what they're interested in and what they care about and why they're there. And so, and that's another thing about markets that's so useful is because you end up having a lot of conversations with people and you hear what it is that drew them in, what caught their attention, what about your story resonates with them, you know, so that all of those sorts of things are incredibly useful learning experiences that will compound over time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you handle, do you have problem customers or people, you know, this is something I hear from a lot of people who are really scared of doing markets because they don't want someone to give them any sort of negative feedback, right? They're worried someone's going to say something nasty or they're going to go, oh, that's too expensive or whatever. Like, how do you handle that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's funny. Like a lot of people, and I've been there myself, where if you don't engage at all, you can't get anything negative. But the negative are like 0.1%. So if you never engage, you'll never get the 99.9% of the amazing compliments and conversations.
Yeah.
But this is another reason why I've stopped doing local markets, like your, you know, weekly or even monthly, even if they're just handmade. You get a lot more criticism almost, or like negative comments than what you get at these big shows, because the organizers have made it very clear what the weekend's going to be all about. So the people who are like that, they don't tend to come to those markets. But if I think back about like when I was doing local markets, you would get a lot of like, oh, is this the price? Oh, no, that's way too expensive for what it is. Or I think that's probably the most that I get. Just because of my price point. Every other time I get like, oh my God, this is the most amazing resin work that I've ever seen. I've seen some other stuff, but this, you know, and so I tend to get a lot of positive stuff. I tend to, at the local markets, a lot of like, one of the things that we all get is, well, my partner can make this. Or, oh, Julie, come and check this out. You should make this for your daughter. Or, you know, or I could make this, or, you know, that style kind of thing. Those ones I just let be. Like, it's about learning, what are you going to get out of saying something? Like, are you going to convert those into a sale? Are you going to make them feel better by criticizing them for criticizing your work? No, So I always think back of what am I going to achieve by saying X, Y, and Z. And if nothing positive comes out of it, I just leave them be. A lot of people, like, the older I get, the more I realize that everyone comes from a different background and a different perspective and a different knowledge base. And the one thing I hear a lot of from other makers is like, well, how do they not understand? How do they not understand that they shouldn't touch that? How do they not understand that this is fragile? Or how do they not understand how long this takes? Or how many years it's taken me to find the right material? And they just ask me like, oh, what material do you use? I want to make it. And it's like, when you understand that everyone comes from a different baseline, it's very rarely comes from a bad spot. And as soon as you realize it's not coming with bad intentions, it's so much easier to just wash it off and go, no, it's not a personal attack. It's not them trying to like dismiss all the years of me having to make things wrong and the money I've spent, and because they don't realize, they don't understand. So why take it personally?
That's a really good perspective. So let's switch gears a little bit here and talk a bit about time management, because you mentioned you had RSI injury, and I believe that's something you still deal with. So how does that impact your day-to-day work life, and how does your day-to-day work life look like? Do you work certain days? Do you work certain hours? How does that all work for you? Because this is your full-time career, right?
It is, yeah. And it actually has been my full-time ever since beginning of COVID. Give or take, more or less income depending on the year. Look, I don't know if my RSI it's definitely less now than it was in the beginning. But I think I've also got really good at managing it. So it's not really much of a forefront of my thought process when I'm deciding to make or not. And I think maybe it's just subconsciously, I can't stand for 6 hours straight because that's not going to work for me. I think it's a combination of, when you work with an injury, it's to allow yourself not to think that you're lazy. Because that was a big struggle. And I hear that a lot from people who have chronic pain or, chronic tiredness or whatever it is that you're projecting like, oh, I'm being lazy today. I'm not good enough. Why can't I work harder? I should do this. I should do that.
Yeah.
And just accepting that actually this is my reality. And what is the alternative? Well, the alternative is that I can't work for anyone else. So, okay, I'll just sit on the dole and, not do anything. So it's like putting things into perspective of what is the alternative, and you do the best with what you have. I've also realized probably in the last 6 months that I probably have ADHD, and I don't want to be one of those people who are like going, oh, I'm self-diagnosed, no, I'll just go. Like, it's quite clear to me. Majority of my friends have been diagnosed with it, and the way we communicate about all the, what's the word for it? Like symptoms almost. It's like, okay, yeah, probably do. Which leads me to that my day is I work on 10 projects. I cannot focus on one thing from start to finish. If you come into my workshop, I have clocks that are half finished. I have cheese knives that are in half stages. And then normally, and this is something I need to work on, but normally, like within the last 2 days of a market, all my products are 80 to 90% finished. And in the last 2 days, everything gets finished. But I don't have time to take product photos. I don't have time to do social media content. I don't have time to do like soft releases of a product, because by the time I finish it, it goes in a box. I drive to the market, sell out, and then I come home and go, well, I have to start all over again. So that is definitely like my Achilles heel, but it keeps me motivated to go out into the workshop. Like, my brain is really happy doing it that way. And also with my injury, it I never have to do repetitive motion for too long.
Yeah.
And then I take breaks. Like as far as I understand, when you're divergent, is that you can get, like, you have your hyper focus, but then you need your downtime to kind of get back up again. And I do have those as well. Like, I can go in and work 12 hours one day, but then the next day I don't do anything. I'm just like in a coma, just going, I can't get up. But I've allowed myself, like, yes. I just, it's forgiving yourself or not even forgiving, just accepting. Like, it's okay. As long as the work gets done, who cares how it gets done? If you do it at 2 a.m. in the morning, do it at 2 a.m. in the morning. Like, there's no rules.
There aren't any rules when you work for yourself. And that's one of the nicest things. You make the rules and you do it the way you want to do it and when you want to do it. Excellent. Gosh, well, we've been chatting for a long time, so I think it's probably time to wrap things up. Mona, this has been awesome. Do you have some final advice for people who are on this handmade business journey, stuff that you wish you'd known when you started?
Oh God, things we haven't covered. I think for me, the biggest hurdle was, and I think a lot of people who start making things just start making things because they're bored or they find interest in something, and it's never with the intention of, I'm going to start making this because I'm going to make this my full-time business. And to take that kind of mind frame to then selling is a big leap. It's like, at what point do you do that? And I was lucky that I ran into a girl at a dog park who was like, oh, you make jewelry, you should apply for the Etsy Handmade Market. It's you need to apply now. It's in 6 months' time. I was like, what? And at the same time, I had a friend who's now a really good friend that I met through social media. She opened up a pop-up shop around the corner from me and said, I want to sell your products. And I was like, oh, but what if no one likes it? And what if, like, what price should I have? And I haven't thought about merchandising. She's like, don't worry about any of that. Just bring it here, see what happens. And that was such a good thing because I started selling out. Right. I brought a few things, and next day she's like, Mona, they're gone. Make more. And, I think lucky. I don't believe in luck. Like, luck is the work that you put behind things. But I think it's just do it. Like, just go out and sell. If that's what you want to do. If you want to make money, just make the leap, go out there and try something. Because if you're just sitting at home, going, oh, no one's looking at my Instagram post, I'm not making a sale. Like, you need to go out and try different things. You need to try Etsy, you need to try markets, you need to try wholesale, you need to, and also tell people. So many people who friends of mine who started businesses don't even tell their friends. They don't tell their workplace, they don't tell their relatives, they don't tell the people at the dog park. Just tell everyone. You don't have to be like, do you know what I do? But you can be like, oh, do you know what I did today? Or what do you do for a living? Well, actually, I do this for a living, but this is actually what my passion is. Just slip it in there,
I think that's a really good point because I see that a lot too. People just kind of keep it close to the vest. I'm like, your friends and family, hopefully, might be your biggest supporters. And, they're the people who'll, maybe buy you. I mean, a friend of mine was the first person who bought something off me because I put it on my Facebook, so you never know who's going to be your biggest supporter until you tell them and get the word out about it. Lovely. So where's the best place for people to go and see your beautiful work?
Because it's the Christmas season, I'll be everywhere. I will be at Finders Keepers in Melbourne in about 2.5 weeks. A couple of weeks after that, I'll be at the Makers and Shakers in Sydney. Then I will be back in Melbourne again, and then back in Sydney, and then I'll end the year in Canberra, just about 10 days before Christmas. But for those people who obviously aren't in any of those cities, and potentially I'll do 1 or 2 small markets in Brisbane, you can always find me online. My website is rivertimberdesigns.com.au. You can find me on social media. And I always say to everyone that what you see on the website isn't necessarily, well, it definitely isn't everything that I've got finished or about to finish. So I always say, treat me almost like a custom making artist. You send me a message and go, hey, I'm looking at coasters. Do you have any blue ones? I'll take photos, I'll send them to you. To me, that's less work than having to guess what I should put on the website and then spend all that time in doing really pretty product photos. I'd rather you just send me a message and I can do a slightly casual photo just for you. So yeah, please don't hesitate to just shoot me a direct message what you're offering.
Yeah. So I assume on your Instagram, you've got a lot more sort of works in progress and stuff that you're working on and new products and all that sort of stuff.
And my stories, I always do like, oh, this one I'm working on. I get a message going, Mona, don't sell it yet. I was like, okay, when it's finished, it's yours.
That's great. And I think that's a great final tip, because for people, especially who do one-of-a-kind designs like you do, I think it's a very different style of selling to the people who do reproducible stuff, because like me, I don't have like the urgency aspect of things, because I only have, I can make as many as necessary. But with your products and anyone else, like ceramicists, people who make one-of-a-kind products, by doing that sort of teasing of stuff, you get to your fans, and you get, no doubt you have collectors, people who come back and buy things from you over and over again, and they're kind of watching and seeing what you're doing. So by having that sort of connection with them and putting your stuff up there as you're making it, you can make a lot of sales just because they kind of leap on it and go, that I want that one.
Yeah.
So it's a great addition to doing the markets is, getting that sort of casual online sale from your biggest fans, which is fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been lovely. You've got so much wisdom to share with everybody, and I hope everyone who listened or watched this has a lot to take away. So thank you so much, Mona.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a bucket list thing to be on a podcast. So now I can tick that one off.
I'm glad it was mine.
How good was that? Thank you so much for watching/listening. If you're listening on the podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this one and found it useful. If you're listening on the podcast, then make sure to give me a rating and review. If you're on Spotify, it's super easy. You just navigate to the Create and Thrive podcast and click on those 5 stars. Would really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for trusting me to help you on your handmade business journey. I really, really appreciate you spending the time with me today. Don't forget to go check out Mona's beautiful work at her website. I will put it on the screen and it will be in the description below the YouTube video, as well as in the show notes for the podcast episode. And if you enjoyed this interview, you might really enjoy this one with Laurel Taylor as well, because we talk a lot about markets in that interview as well. And she's just super fun. So go have a watch and listen to that one next. Thanks so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you in the next video /podcast, and bye for now.